All right, everybody. Welcome to our webinar today. I'm Jacqueline Kelly with Better Homes and Gardens Real Estate Destinations here in the Florida Keys. And today our webinar is all about the home inspection and the title phrase. So if you've been following along, we've had a 5-part series. This is number 4. Now we're deep into the transaction and we're moving on to home inspections. Such an important part and a fun part of the process. So we're excited to share it. And today we have some great, wonderful guest speakers. I'd like to go ahead and introduce our panel members first. We have on the call today is going to be Erin Keel. She is an agent here at Better Homes and Gardens, and she's going to be discussing with Chris Loesch from Deep Dive Inspections, and they're going to be chatting a lot about the home inspection. And we have Samantha Arce as our panelist from Better Homes and Gardens, and she's going to be discussing the title phase with Kinsey Jackson from the title station. So thank you all for being here. Behind the scenes, we have some other committee members that were an integral part in putting this together. We have Karen Williams de Castro, Jana Pratt, Stephanie Camacho, and Ada Rodriguez. So there were a lot of brilliant minds putting this together, and we're happy to share our insights with you today. Just to, I guess, we'll go over the process a little bit, and then at the end, we will review any questions that you may put in the chat. So please ask away, and we'll be sure to address your questions. Any that we didn't get to, feel free to, or just know that your dedicated agent at Better Homes and Gardens will be sure to follow up with you and make sure your questions did get answered. So please ask away. We're excited to hear from you. We have one more webinar after this, which is going to be held March 6th at 4 p.m. And that is going to be on insurance, which is a big one. Kind of ties into what you're going to hear a lot about today from Chris. With the different insurance inspections. So it's all going to make sense once you hear both. So be sure to tune in for that one as well. And these webinars are all posted on our YouTube channel. You can find us at BHGRE Destinations there on YouTube. So, all right, without further ado, I will, well, one more disclaimer I wanted to say is that keep in mind that we are located in the Florida Keys and in South Florida, and there might be differences to where you're located, but this is a general overview, and it's certainly how things work here in South Florida from professionals that deal with this every day. But some things might differ if you're located in a different part of the country. Be sure to ask your realtor for clarification on any questions that you have, and ask us. We can help you connect with a great realtor in your area. But yeah, I guess that's about it. And every transaction is different, so you might have a different experience, and we'd love to hear about that too. So, all right. Well, welcome everybody.
Thank you.
All right, Erin, you ready to get started?
Sure. Thanks so much, Jacqueline. Again, my name is Erin Keel, and I'm a realtor and broker associate. And I've been working in real estate since 2019 in the Florida Keys and South Florida. And one of the most important things and I always get surprised when clients, maybe they're purchasing with cash and they think that they don't need an inspection. I always am surprised when they don't want to follow through with an inspection, because if you watched our first webinar, just to recap that a little bit, it is one of, if not the most important, investments or biggest investments that you're going to make in your entire life. Why not, spend a couple hundred, couple thousand on inspections to, protect that asset, to know what you're getting into. It's so important. Even if you are a very experienced buyer, there's so many things, especially, in these different counties or cities that you're not really familiar with, that your inspector is going to be familiar with. So it's just important whether you're a newbie or really experienced to get your inspections. Again, protects your investment. You need it for insurance purposes. If you do plan on getting insurance, Chris is going to dive deeper into that in a second. And yeah, like I said, just knowing what you're getting into for primary home buyers, newbie investors, knowing what might be an immediate need, but also in the future, like what's my maintenance going to look like for these items? And a great inspector like Chris is going to outline these things for you. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen, and I wanted to introduce Chris Loesch again. Chris, can you start off by telling us a little bit about yourself, and also your designation, which I'm going to pull up here if I can. of being a master inspector. Can you guys see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. All right, Chris, take it away.
So, like Erin said, Chris Loesch, Deep Dive Property Inspections. Basically, been doing inspections for the last 6 years. Previous to that, I was building homes from the ground up. And once I decided to get out of that trade, this was kind of just a natural transition for me. And I like helping people, whether that was building homes or now inspecting them for them. So that's kind of how I ended up doing what I do. And when we decided to move to the Keys, it was like just time to start the own business. So like I said, doing it 6 years, in order to become a certified master inspector, which is what you're seeing, you have to have been doing inspections for 3 years. You have to have completed a minimum of 1,000 paid inspections. And then you have to apply to a board and meet all your continuing education credits and keep up on that. Be professional, you're vetted. So they run background checks on us. So there's a little bit more to it. Not everybody that applies gets it. But after having been in the business for several years now, I think it's always a good idea. The more information, the better. And a master inspector is going to be doing all those things, and you're going to have confidence in that because of what it takes to become one.
That's awesome. No, I really appreciate you explaining that. I actually didn't know any of that. I knew that you were awesome and had a lot of education behind you, but that's really great to know. And when you work with a local realtor, we do provide a list of reputable professional inspectors, and that's a great thing to ask is are you, certified master inspector? Just a little side note, we've had situations where an inspector has like gone through a property in an hour. And that's kind of like one of those red flag things. You're just like, well, what's going on? Did you actually look at the property for what my buyer paid for? And so again, working with, a realtor that has experience with these great inspectors is the way to go. So Chris, let's get into a few inspections if that's okay, if you're ready for that. Can you, again, in webinar 1, we kind of briefly talked about the home buyer's inspection and then the additional 4-point and the additional wind mitigation. Can you explain, the basics of these inspections, what they look like for the buyer, and maybe like the ones for insurance purposes?
Yeah, sure. So a standard home inspection should include everything that's visible on the grounds, the exterior of the structure, the interior, testing all the appliances, HVAC, getting up on the roof. I prefer to actually walk on the roof, get eyes on it. And the way that I look at it is to provide as much information as I can to the buyers and their realtor that they're working with, to where they just can make a more informed decision. Things to be aware about is if there's a pool on the property, generally that is an add-on that you should let the inspector know, like, hey, there's a pool, we want it inspected as well, because that's typically not part of just the home inspection. Same thing if there's a mother-in-law suite or a guest suite that's a separate of the structure, any structures that aren't attached. And then if you want any other services like an air quality test, mold testing, lead, asbestos, any of those things are usually in addition to, because they're their own charges for that. And then the insurance inspections, it used to be kind of a hard and fast rule that if the property was 2003 or older, insurance companies were going to request the 4-point report and the wind mitigation. The 4-point report, the 4 points of it are plumbing, roof, electrical, and HVAC. What the insurance companies are looking at is if each one of those areas has a minimum of 5 years of service life left. So there's kind of a standard service age given to all appliances, including roofs, different types of materials of roofs, same thing with HVAC, plumbing, and electrical. So as long as all those areas of the 4-point report have at least 5 years of service life left, most insurance companies are going to be happy with that and go ahead and write a policy for you. If there's any 1 or 2 of those areas that maybe aren't meeting this 5 years of service life left, like maybe there's only 2 years left on the HVAC, they might request that that is upgraded. And sometimes they'll give you a certain grace period, a month, 6 months, a year, depends on the insurance company. Wind mitigation, first of all, the wind mitigation needs to be redone every 5 years. So that's something that I always try letting people know, because this is all state and insurance driven. So the reason that needs to be redone is they're looking for corrosion of the straps. And, you know, if there's been upgrades, if there's been a new roof, and the wind mitigation gives credits for your home insurance policy through your insurance company. So it's in your benefit to do that, because even if you kind of have bare minimum credits, it's still going to give you something. But if you have, like in the Keys, for example, if you have storm rated doors and windows, that could give you a substantial credit.
Yeah,
So-
definitely. And so when a buyer is going into a property, you know, we recommend the home buyer's inspection. And like you said, the 4-point, and then the wind mitigation. And for how you structure it, those are typically like separate fees, or if you kind of get them all, it's bundled together.
So how I do it is I do keep them separate, because as we all know, sometimes you find something during an inspection that is going to change the buyer's minds, unfortunately. But when that does happen, the way that I look at it, they didn't have to spend the extra money on the insurance reports until they need them. So I'm not going to charge up front for those. And I also give my clients, and I think most guys do, you get the insurance reports at a discounted rate. So like for me, it's 50% of what I usually charge if I'm just doing insurance inspections for somebody. So you get those reports at half price if I do the full home inspection. Like I said, most inspectors have some sort of deal like that.
Gotcha. So just to recap, so if a buyer has their home inspection, and they go through it, I know you usually, a great inspector is going to have that to you well within 48 hours, some within 24, and they'll go through it and see, okay, I'm ready to move forward. I'm good to go. Let's get ahead and contact our inspector for this 4-point and the wind mitt. And then you'll get that over to us quickly, and then we can help facilitate them giving just the wind mitt and the 4-point inspections over to the insurance company, so they can get going on quotes, and then we can, you know, be smooth in our transaction and work towards closing. I have all that right?
Yep, no, nailed it.
Okay. Awesome. Awesome. Oh, and I did want to mention one thing. So the home buyer's inspection report, especially for people who just don't buy homes a lot, or it's the first time, it's really long. It's super extensive. Can you kind of just outline what, you know, I think are there 3 different kind of levels of if something is needs maintenance, et cetera. Can you outline those? And I just kind of wanted to tell buyers to not be scared. It's your job to tell them every little thing that is going on with the house, whether it's good, it's going to need repair in the future, or it needs repaired now. And it's something to consider, but not be, you know, like, I can't buy this house because it has a loose, you know, door handle.
Yeah. And I try to not be overly technical in my report to where you don't have to have an engineering degree to understand what I'm saying. So I will, you know, include a picture of something that I think is deficient or needs repair, and explain where it's at and why I think it needs repair or is deficient in some manner. I also have, I call it levels of severity. So each item that I flag or want to bring out to the buyer's attention, I will mark it with a different level of severity. And it goes from a phase 2 evaluation, which basically means I've done everything I can do and I recommend getting a specialist. So if there was some serious electrical issues, I would recommend getting a professional insured electrician and have them come in and take a look at it, because in my opinion, something needs to be corrected. and it's to a point where, okay, I've done everything I can do. There's definitely an issue here. Now we bring in a specialist. So that's kind of the top one. Then it goes to warning. A lot of that has to do with safety stuff. So weak handrails on decks, anything electrical pretty much, and anything of safety concerns, smoke alarms that aren't working. Then we kind of get into needs repair, which is just that, if it needs to be repaired or corrected in some way. And then the next one down is action needed. And that is, it still needs to be addressed, but the other categories above it need to be addressed before that. So if you were making a to-do list, I would do the top things first, but definitely address the action needed things. Then it's kind of just more information for the buyer and the realtors. I have a FYI section that if it's important things like where the water shutoff is or the power shutoff, I will highlight those with FYI because those are really good things to know. And if there's any other, special things to know about a certain property, I will mark it with those. So that's kind of how my levels of severity that I call them work.
Okay, I'm gonna share the screen again, and you had a picture here. Can you guys see it?
Yeah.
I don't know if you can see that.
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay.
Okay, cool. So can you explain this picture for one of your inspections?
Yeah, so this, I wish I had another picture to go along with this, because what you're seeing is an AC register in the ceiling of a new home construction build, but there was no AC register there. So they had drywalled over it. And the only way that I found it was with my infrared camera, which is what we're looking at there. So that blue area is where the register is behind the drywall on the ceiling. So
Gotcha.
that's just one of those things, even on new homes that are new builds, sometimes you find things that, and the reason that's important is since it was a ceiling register, that cold air was just being blown right back into the attic. Well, attics, especially in Florida, are extremely hot. So you have this cold air from the AC meeting this hot air in the attic. It's going to create condensation, moisture. Pretty soon you're going to get a wet roof right there, damaged drywall, insulation, could lead to mold, all sorts of things.
Gotcha. Okay. And another point I wanted to touch on was these inspections were kind of geared more towards buyers as our home buyers webinar, but they're great to have too for before you're getting ready to sell, even if you've purchased and had, like you said, 5 years. So maybe you can be proactive before you sell, so you know what your wind mitigation is gonna say, so you can help buyers. Or you can better attract, buyers knowing what they're going to get into. Same with the home inspection beforehand, things that might need to be repaired, and then if we get all those items addressed, we can get hopefully closer to that ask price or even over. So that's something you offer as well, right?
Yes, and the important thing about those, because I do a fair amount, I would say probably 20% of my inspections are pre-listing.
Oh, wow.
And the reason why is if somebody wants to, get the house on the market and get it gone, they'll do a pre-listing to where they know everything that needs to be corrected or fixed before they get an offer on the house. So there's going to be no surprises. And then when you're at the table, there's not going to be any hiccups in the process because everything is either going to have been addressed or be sold as is, which does happen. But at least everybody's aware about it, and then they can disclose it, or they can just say sold as is.
Yeah, I think that's a great tool for when after you buy and you're ready to sell, to get it so that you can just close it and, like you said, be really an as is. I'm gonna try to share my screen again, but I think let's move on to some fun stories, some like crazy things you've seen. And I'm going to switch over to, let's start with this picture. Can you see it?
Not yet.
Okay. My Zoom is a little slow, but it is a really cute picture. At first, I really thought it was a baked potato when you sent it over because it's like it's aluminum foil, and in the center is insulation and like 3 tiny, are they little bats?
So that's a family, a whole litter of raccoons.
Of
Oh my gosh.
raccoons. I thought they were bats. Oh my gosh. Okay.
So I was in an attic, and it was this like multi-million-dollar mansion. And I went up in the attic because it's just one of the things that we do. And I opened the attic hatch, and this whole little litter of baby raccoons was in the attic. And that, what you think is aluminum foil there, that's ductwork for the AC
Yep.
system. And Mama Raccoon had torn it open. So where they were laying, sleeping there, there was cold air coming out of the air conditioning system. So
Wow.
I thought that was incredible that she knew to do that.
Yeah.
But she ended up coming back. She had gained access into the roof through a vent on the roof. She literally pulled the metal up and pulled the screen out and was able to crawl in there. And then she had obviously been living in this attic for a long time. There was trails all through the insulation. And of course, she had the babies up there. She was not very happy I was up there.
So in that situation, do you just contact a animal control or animal specialist that you have? Okay.
Yeah, like an
Um,
exterminator or somebody, a pest removal person. You know, the first thing they got to do is extradite the animals out of the space and then do the remediation needed and then get it closed up immediately. So her access point, like I had all this stuff together in one area of the report so that they knew this is how she got in, that whole vent needed to be replaced, and then, you know, recommend having the insulation removed and this and that and the other in the areas that were affected. But yeah, it's always an adventure.
yeah, and can you guys hear me okay? I think my internet's a little slow. Okay. Also at least in the Florida Keys, and I know in a lot of different areas of Florida, where we have protected species, like you said, to contact the correct agency to properly remove. Like for example, we have the key lurker wood rat and things like that, to properly remove them from the house. So that's just another component. So really important to have that inspection.
Yeah.
Okay, and then, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say bats too in Florida are protected. So if you have bats in your attic and they have babies, they can't be removed until the babies are able to fly. So
Ah,
that's one of those things that's good to know about sooner
gotcha.
rather than later.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so this is our last picture we're going to talk about, and can you explain this one?
Yeah, so this happened this year. This is a new home 3-phase inspection. So my new home phased inspections, the first inspection is pre-slab. So when all the rough in plumbing and rebar and electrical are in, but the concrete slab hasn't been poured yet, I do an inspection. And then there is the second phase, which is pre-drywall. Well, this family had contacted me right at this phase when this happened, and it was basically a catastrophic failure of this entire
Wow.
wall. So they were in the middle of construction, and there was a microburst. The wall wasn't properly supported, and that entire wall fell down.
The new construction, that's
Yep.
insane. Wow. So how'd that end?
So
Not good.
it was a kind of long story, but the short version is the construction company had got hit with a stop work order because the house wasn't set back far enough on the property. It didn't meet the setbacks. So the county, city shut them down. Well, the top, in these block houses, there's solid concrete beam that's poured around the top that kind of locks everything in. Well, that hadn't been poured yet because they got hit with a stop work order. The construction company, unfortunately, didn't properly support the wall when they got hit with a stop work order. And I don't know if that's because they didn't think it was that important. Well, they had a windstorm that went through the area, and unfortunately, that was the result. But
Wow.
they did end up, because the damage continued around the corners on both sides of that wall. they ended up going back, tearing down all the concrete block that had been affected and redoing all of it.
Wow.
So once that got done, and a structural engineer got involved, but once all that got done, they continued along with the process. The family that was buying the house or having it built, and a couple of months later, I did the final inspection, and they're perfectly happy now. So at the end, it was a happy ending, but they weren't happy for a while.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I know you've seen a lot of crazy things in your time, but thanks for sharing those stories. Is there any other thing or actually, let me ask you one more thing. We talked a little bit about the extra inspections like pool, mold, asbestos, etc. And where we're located in the Keys, we have a lot of waterways. So do you do the seawall inspection and boat lifts as well?
Yes. So I try to do everything that I can do, and there's classes and certifications for every single phase. So becoming a home inspector, you have to take all these classes for each thing, and then when you start adding on abilities like a pool inspection, you have to go through and do courses and training and all of that. But as a matter of fact, the inspection I did today, there was a concrete dock and there was a whole bunch of spalling that with exposed rebar underneath. It's just one of those things that, like I said earlier, just provide as much information as possible to the prospective buyers and the realtors so everybody can make the best decision.
Right, informed decisions. Same go for termites. So could you write any inspections on termites, or do you refer out?
So termites are the one things that I refer out. I have previously been termite certified. The termite certification is kind of a unique deal because you have to work under somebody that is called a certified pest control operator. And since I no longer do that, it's in order for me to do it, it's ridiculous. But since I did do it for 4 years, I know what to look for. And it's just the way that I look at it is if there's damage from termites, that's just damage in general. So if I see that there is some sort of damage from a wood destroying organism, I will recommend, hey, probably a good idea to get a termite company out here to do their inspection, because a lot of termite companies will include an inspection for free. Because if you're calling them because I told you that you probably should call them, you're going to want to have a treatment. So if they're going to do the treatment, they'll do the inspection for free most of the time. Right.
I know a lot of might be a couple $100, but if you need tenting, they'll put that towards the tenting. And another thing, in South Florida, termites are pretty common. It's not anything necessarily be scared about, but I think buyers do get scared, especially when they're not from this area. But it's just like you said, the more information we have, then we know how to move forward. Okay, do we need to schedule the tenting? Do we need to go back to the sellers and try to negotiate that? So knowledge is power. Thank you so much, Chris, for joining us. Anything else you wanted to add before we head on to Sam and Kinsey?
No, I think that's it. Unless anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer anything.
Yeah, I just think that the communication between your agent and the inspector, the insurance component, and then the title company, like we're going to hear about in just a little bit, is so important to have that open line of communication. Like Chris was saying, if something does come up, we could try to negotiate it, or we can check with insurance. Chris has helped me out several times. We could check with insurance and see what needs to be done to the property so that we can get a policy, or we can get better credits for you as the buyer. So anyways, again, thank you so much, Chris, and I'll send it back over to Jacqueline.
Thank you so much. I cannot believe some of those photos that you just showed us. I mean, how crazy. I was shocked at the, I don't know why I was shocked by this. I shouldn't be, but the AC vent being covered up, I really didn't realize what I was looking at there. So that certainly took a trained eye. I mean, it sounds like you wouldn't have even known if you didn't have, the right gadget. So incredible. Yeah, I've seen some really incredible things over the years as well. And I cannot stress how important the home inspection is. And this is not, we did a webinar already on the home buying process, but just to give our viewers a little insight, The day we go under contract, your due diligence period begins. We also call it an inspection period. That length of time is negotiable. Your realtor will help you determine how much time you might need. But for example, it might be 10 or 15 days. And so important. The first thing we do is call the home inspector. We call Chris. We say, you know, please get us on your calendar. And he's our first person out there to look at all these things. And then we might get quotes on anything that he suggests or anything that he reports that might need to be looked at. So it's important to have that due diligence period. Here in Florida or here in the Keys, we typically use the as-is contract, which means that you have the right to inspect anything you want, and you have your right to cancel within that inspection period or that due diligence. All of your research, be very thorough, because so many different things will pop up in the home inspection itself, or in just so many other, you know, just things that you want to research if there's assessments or whatnot. And that will take us into the title phase, where they really look into that good stuff. But so important to get that inspection. I get so nervous when people tell me they want to waive it. Even if you're really experienced contractor, it's really nice to go in and know exactly what you're dealing with, and make sure that there isn't something extensive going on, such as really extensive spalling repair. Or I remember twice this has happened to me, where we thought it was a single family home, and the inspector got in the attic and realized that there was actually a mobile home under there, and it even still had the wheel well, and they literally built a house around it. You could not tell. We were shocked. And it then happened again to me. So you just never know what people do. And we also look around and compare it to a permit search to go, okay, this house we're here at today has 5 bedrooms. It's 5,000 square feet. But on the tax records and on the permits, it's showing that it's a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom with 1,500 square feet. Where did all this other space come from? So we look at all of those things and discuss them with the home inspector and say, what do we have going on here? So so just know that you have time to do all of that stuff, as long as you negotiate it in, and really make sure you're doing your due diligence and have a good team behind you. So so we get our home inspection done, and then once you feel good with moving forward, we start the title phase. Typically your deposit's already in escrow with the escrow agent, and who doubles as the closing agent. So so moving things right along in this purchase and sale. So I'm going to turn the mic over to our panelist, Samantha Arce, and she's going to discuss title with Kinsey Jackson. Take it away.
Well, hi, thanks everybody for being here today. I'm so excited you've joined us for our 4th webinar. And my name is Sam Arce. I am a lifelong resident of the Florida Keys and an agent with Better Homes and Gardens Real Estate Destinations here in Key Largo. And today we are going to dive into title insurance. And in the most simple of terms, it is a type of insurance that does protect you, the homeowner, and your mortgage lender from any potential financial losses related to the title. And as your local real estate professional, I will provide you with a list of qualified title agents, closing agents, and in Florida, you can use an attorney as well. But that does lead me to just being aware that this is a very complicated but extremely important process. So you need a closing agent that's going to be very thorough and timely, and so that all of our critical dates are met, and our transaction timeline stays nice and tidy. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce you to Miss Kinsey Jackson from the title station.
Hi, thank you all for having me.
Kinsey. Thank you so much for being here with us today. And I know there's lots of moving steps that buyers don't really see. So could you explain to us like the process from the moment that the contract is executed, and kind of walk us through what it looks like on your end?
Yeah, of course. So, we'll get the contract from one of the realtors, either the selling agent or the listing agent. We'll immediately put all the information from the contract into our system. We verify that the parcel matches the property appraiser, and we will send all of that information that we collect from the contract to our licensed underwriting attorneys, and they are licensed real estate attorneys. And then within 2 to 3 days, we will get the title search back. And on that title search, that's where we see if the sellers have, you know, they're actually the owners of this property and they hold it free and clear, or if there's a payoff that's needed, which is a current mortgage on the property, or if there's an HOA association that requires an HOA estoppel to be ordered. This also includes any liens on the property that could be from previous owners. And what we do once we get that title search back is we will go through and see exactly what is needed to clear the title. And then we will we'll send out an email to both agents explaining what exactly we need to clear the title. And lots of it, you know, the majority of it is very simple. We'll get the HOA information, we'll order the HOA estoppel, we'll get the, you know, the current mortgage, information from the seller, and then we'll go ahead and order a payoff. And then after that, it's basically, we wait for if it is a, you know, a transaction with a financing, we will wait for the lender to send us their title requests, and then we'll send all the documents to them. And once we have appraisal approval, we go ahead and order the survey. And once we have the survey in and lender's ready to close, we draw up all the documents, all the legal documents, the deed, the lender draws up the mortgage, and then we have all the affidavits that are needed. We make sure all the HOAs are clear, that there's no HOA violations that need to be cleared, that the payoff, you know, there's no issues with the payoff, and that the sellers are the owners of that property. We've gotten very specific with vacant lands. We go into a lot more detail with those because there is a huge fraud issue now with the people who are selling the property are not actually the owners. So we now have a new step with those, but that's easy for us to go through as well. So basically this title search that we get back promises that you will get a home that will be yours, and nobody can ever come and claim that it is their property, because you will be issued an owner's policy at closing, and that policy protects you.
Well, I mean, why wouldn't you want to do that, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Can you tell me like what the difference in your process is for a cash deal versus a finance transaction?
Well, cash deals, typically, if there's no issues on title, they're closed in 2 weeks or less. So that's, you know, very simple. They don't require a survey because most lenders do require a survey to clear the Florida Form 9 endorsement. However, even when it is a cash transaction, I highly recommend getting a survey either way so that you know the property lines and we can show that there are no encroachments over anything, or there's any easements that we need to worry about or anything like that. So that's, I mean, that's really the main difference really is on my end is just have the survey or not.
Okay.
And then, you know, it will take longer because the lender will have more documents for us to sign and everything, but my closing package for cash transactions is like 15 pages. But it's still the same owner's policy. It's when the lender comes in, you know, they have a lot more thorough documents and everything. But yeah, for the most part, just the appraisal and survey that we wait on for the lender, and then make sure that the buyer goes through the underwriting process with the lender. And then once they're cleared with them, it's the same as a cash transaction. It's just their documents thrown into our regular documents with the deed and all that.
Okay. Can you tell us exactly what a cloud or a defect on the title is and how we resolve them, and if we can close with them resolved or not, just so people run into things like that?
One of the most common clouds on title is when the sellers, when they purchased the property, the previous owners, they did a quitclaim deed. They didn't get title insurance. So they did a quitclaim deed, and for the most part, they never put the marital status for either of the parties, and that is required if it is a homesteaded property. So we'd have to go back and get a corrected deed from those previous owners, which they sometimes can be hard to track down, especially if this quitclaim deed was drawn up in, you know, early 2000s, late 90s. It can be difficult to get that cleared. But if it wasn't their homestead, it's not required. But if on the quitclaim deed there's no non-homestead verbiage on that quitclaim deed, then it is still required. So that's the main cloud on title that we see, and we cannot close without getting that fixed. There are other ways we can go around it. There a lot of times we can go to our underwriters and present specific situations. Say those previous sellers, they passed away. They had no living relatives who could have any claim to that property. And our underwriters will give an exception, and they'll still let us have the title cleared and the owner's policy granted. And that even if our underwriters give us the clear and you get that owner's policy, it's still going to protect you no matter what. But that's it's rare that we have that happen. So there's that one with the quitclaim deeds. And then I would also like to mention when people deed over to others and after the sellers have passed away, they don't necessarily check if probate is needed. So if the deed that they transferred over didn't say husband and wife or joint tenants with rights of survivorship, that raises a big red flag. And, they say, well, I was in the will, I was in this. It doesn't necessarily matter. That whole situation has to go through probate, and that can take months depending on the attorney that is hired to handle that. So that is another thing, but that is usually cleared, but yeah, again, we have to have these cleared before closing. And,
Okay,
everything's different. We see new things almost every day come up in these searches, and we just work around them. We find different ways to clear it, and we get it done.
Okay, so what happens after closing, and like when do they expect to receive their title insurance policy?
So immediately after closing, we record the deed and mortgage, and within 4 to 6 weeks, you will receive that original deed that you signed as well as the owner's policy. However, you can ask, even if you maybe misplace it later and you end up selling your house within 3 years after you purchased it and you want that owner's policy to get your reissue credit, we keep all of our policies in our system forever. So you can always come back to us and look for your policy, ask for your policy, and you'll have that as well. So
basically, we can rely on you to handle all the annoying things that we don't want to, and you're going to keep the records for it. So it sounds like a good value to me. But and how much does it typically cost? What are the fees for your title service?
So our closing fee, if our cash transaction is $350 for the buyer and $350 for the seller. Financing is more expensive for the buyer because that is a lot more in-depth work for us as well. So it does go to $600 for the buyer and then stays at $350 for the seller. The owner's title policy is based off the sales price as well as the lender's title policy. Survey fees, they are up to the surveyor, but for us, that the only fees we charge are our closing fee. Our title search fee is $85, and then a document storage fee is $33, and those are both charged to the buyer in Monroe County.
Okay. Well, do you have any crazy stories that we can feel better to not run into that you can?
I'm not even joking. We had a crazy story this morning at our Titusville office. So one of our agents had a closing set for noon today, and the buyer is pregnant and she went into labor.
Oh,
so
goodness.
The seller was already at our office signing his documents, and she's like, hey, I want to get this house closed. Can you come to the hospital? So our agent goes to the hospital, starts signing, and they were getting a loan too. So they had about 100 pages. She had about 100 pages to sign in between contractions.
Oh my gosh.
Then they came in to give her the epidural. So our agent went out of the room. They did the epidural, and she came back in and finished signing with her. And they got it all signed. And as of 2 hours ago, the house was closed and sold, and it's hers.
That's dedication.
That's commitment right there. That's
right. She's like, I want to have this house before I have this baby. Like,
There you
okay.
go. Make it work. I
But she
love
wasn't
it.
due for another month almost.
Oh my gosh. Well, see, you never know what's going to happen.
Right.
You never know what's going to happen. It's good to have a good team that'll go count contractions with you.
Exactly.
Well, I think that you explained that beautifully, but do you have any other tips for our home buyers that, any advice you can give them to ensure a smooth process with this?
For home
Other than
buyers,
picking you
not
as their title
much.
agent?
For the title part, it is for on my side, I deal more with the sellers because they're the people I have to go to make sure that the home you're buying is clear. So I don't deal with buyers as much. But my biggest thing would be to make sure you get title insurance, because that's the only way you're going to know for sure that somebody is not going to come and claim your home in 5 years, 15, 50 years. You
Yeah,
never
and in
know if
this day and
someone's going
age
to
of
try.
scammers, I mean, all the insurance we can get, right?
Exactly. And another thing, just watch out for wire fraud. If I will call you before I send you wiring instructions for your escrow deposit or for your final closing proceeds. I will call you. I will say I am emailing them to you. I will tell you what email they were coming from. And I will make sure, and on our wiring instruction packet, we have the last 4 digits of our account number left out. So I'll send that to you and verify that you have our wiring instructions and give you the last 4 digits of our account number to make sure you are not getting wiring instructions from anyone else. We are very, very safe with that because of the increase in wire fraud. So, we just want to clarify, if you receive wire instructions from anyone, always call the people you know already to verify that they sent you those wiring instructions. Because
Good
it's
advice.
very easy for hackers to get in and change just 2 letters in an email and make it look like it's from somebody else's email and they're sending completely different wiring instructions. So it's really on the rise right now. And I just highly suggest double checking, triple checking as much as you can when it comes to getting, because, you have to wire your final proceeds, or final closing amount right before closing. So you just got to make sure you're sending it to the correct person.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I don't know, does anybody else have any questions for Ms. Kinsey while we have her here? My panelists?
We do have a few questions
Awesome.
in the chat. Yep. So there was a question about the elevation certificate. Is that something that is ordered from the title company?
We're not technically required to order surveys or elevation certificates, but we always do. It's just a customary thing for us. And we will order an elevation certificate if the lender is requiring it, or if the buyer has requested it and it's in a flood zone and they want to have that for their flood insurance. So yeah, we'll order it, and it's an easy, it's the same email we send out for the survey request. We'll send, hey, can you throw in an elevation certificate with this as well? So yeah, we'll do that as well.
Awesome.
Perfect. And there is another one for Kinsey in here as well. Having to do with, they asked what happens with shared fences and encroachments on the survey.
So that is, if there are encroachments, that basically we have to take it out of our final owner's policy. We have to leave that as an exception. That's not something we're insuring because there is an encroachment. So we can say, we are insuring this property. No one's going to take it from you, but we cannot insure that that encroachment is yours or anyone's. That's going to have to be cleared up by the surveyor or brought to the neighbor and the owner themselves and fixed before we can clear it up. And a new survey will have to be drawn showing that it was fixed and such.
And then you'd be able to insure it once that's gone. And
right, yeah. So surveys are a little tricky, mainly because a lot of lenders aren't gonna want to put a mortgage on a property where there's boundary line issues like that. So we have to make sure that the survey is clear and fix whatever we can before closing to make sure that it satisfies the lender and the buyer and whoever the other property that it's butting up to against, that they're happy with it as well. So.
Yeah, for sure. I've been involved in a few situations like that. And so I can say what typically happens is that, if we didn't know about the encroachment or that there's a boundary issue, you guys typically will notice it first, in my experience, and say,
Right.
hey, just got the survey in, looks like there's a boundary issue. We've had issues with fences. We've had issues with sheds being over the property line or really close to it, which will be a code violation. And so those things are typically brought to our attention, and then we discuss with the buyers and the sellers and the listing agent and figure out what are the next step. And
Right.
I'm glad you brought up the issue that the lender might have with it. So what we've had to do in the past is get the seller possibly to correct it, like you said. And with the title, when a title defect comes up, according to our contract, the seller gets 30 days to fix it. There's an
Right.
automatic 30-day notice period going on, or a 30-day extension if need be, saying, okay, you have 30 days. There's a title issue here, get it corrected, and then we'll close.
Right.
So that's automatically built in. We've had to have the shed removed. We've had to have fences moved. We've had a lot of different things. One of the craziest things that I've seen is that the dock for the entire street was not owned by those homes. It was owned by the developer who owned a marina across the waterway. And that came up in title and in survey. And we were all quite shocked because supposedly nobody knew, but that was definitely a lack of disclosure issue, because that was for sure in their title policy. That is an
Right.
exclusion. I mean, it's on their property line and you don't own the dock, and it belongs to them. So, I mean, today's webinar sure is all about protecting your asset with
Right.
the title and the inspection. I mean, and this part of it is such an important part of the transaction to really secure your asset and know what you're dealing with here, because so many things can pop up. So we've got more questions coming in here, so I'm going to keep shooting these off here. She asked about using an old survey. I guess for title, is that something?
Yeah, we can use the seller's old survey as long as it's current to the property. No changes can be made since it was drawn, such as a fence, any concrete that was poured. Now, anything that doesn't attach to the actual property, like say it's a gazebo that you can pick up and move, that doesn't matter. But if it is anything concrete or a fence that's stuck into the ground, a shed, stuff like that, yes, we can use the prior survey as long as it is the exact same as when it was drawn in regards to those aspects.
Awesome. That is definitely a money saver. Those
Oh,
can get
yeah.
quite expensive for sure, especially the bigger the lot and the more improvements there are, the price just keeps going up. Another question is if you could please explain what an estoppel letter is and what it's used for.
Oh, sure. So if I know most of the neighborhoods around here have an HOA that is optional. So we don't ever have to worry about it with HOAs that are optional. Now, say it's in an HOA and they have monthly HOA dues that are required. There's no option, pay them or not, you have to pay them. What we do is we'll get the HOA's contact information and we send over what's called an estoppel request. Basically, it's these questions. It's how much are the HOA dues? How often are they due? Are there any collections that this homeowner has? Does this homeowner have any HOA violations that they have not resolved? And are there any capital contributions that the buyer needs to know about, or any future assessments that the buyer needs to know about? Which is basically, once the buyer takes over, they need to know if this HOA is going to up their HOA by a certain amount, or if they need to prepare for any improvements that they're going to be doing in the HOA community properties or community areas. that could be an extra charge to the future buyer. So an HOA estoppel explains all of that to us, and that lets us put the actual HOA prorations onto the final settlement statement. So say they paid for a year of HOAs and it's closing in July, they're getting half or almost half. The seller will get half of their money back, and then the buyer will pay the other half of that year, so that you're not paying. If you paid your HOA dues in January and then you sold it January 31st, and you're like, I just wasted all that money. But no, you'd get it back, and then it would be the buyer would pay the other 11 months of it. So
Awesome. Well, that is a great explanation of it. And really, speaking of proration, taxes are handled in the same way, or I guess the opposite way, because they're paid in arrears
right,
at the end of the year. So so those are always prorated on the closing statement as well.
Yes.
And sometimes utilities or any other things that might be existing,
Yes.
rents, all of that stuff is prorated on the closing statement. So have no fear, we will figure it out on a closing statement somehow, some way, and make sure everybody gets what they were supposed to get. So there was one more question about the title insurance policy, and I'm actually usually surprised by this when I go to list a property, and I always ask, do you have your prior title insurance policy, your survey, and your elevation certificate?
Right.
So I guess more for discussion purposes, these items will save money for the buyer and sometimes the seller. So we always ask for them. Again, surprised how many people don't have for them. But how does having the prior title policy save the buyer money?
So if the seller purchased the home less than 3 years before the buyer's going to buy it, if we have that prior owner's policy, we were able to give the buyers a reissue credit on their owner's policy. So it can save them hundreds of dollars on their owner's policy based off that reissue credit. And it's only within 3 years. So it has to close within the 3 years that they purchased it. But yeah, if the sellers are able to provide that prior policy, the buyers will get a discount on that owner's policy, and it's a good amount too.
Yeah, I've seen some significant discounts on that. And two, doesn't it save on the search as well? Or I guess if you provide the prior title policy, that you only have to do a search back to that date. So it kind of doesn't help out there in some way on the search, or no?
With us, if we get it, we like to have them either way. We don't use them because most of the time it's with their policies with a different underwriter. So either way, we'll do our own search. But a lot of the times, if there are issues that come up on our title search, having the seller's title policy and then adding it to our search can clear up some of the issues.
Nice.
So it's on a case-to-case basis, but it can help us if there's anything. One of the requirements to clear can sometimes be cleared by that seller's owner's policy.
Very good, very good. I guess that's about it. Kind of went over some examples of some title defects a little bit, the sheds and encroachments and stuff. Any other crazy deed restrictions you've seen or title defects you want to share?
I mean, there's not too many
Not
crazy ones that I've had lately. At least they can be time consuming basically.
Yeah.
But if we can track everyone down and get the information needed, we can usually get them all cleared up and get it all done.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. Always such a pleasure to work with. I love doing transactions with you and with Chris. We've had some wonderful speakers here today. If anybody else has some questions, feel free to put them in the chat while we wrap this up. It is 5 o'clock, so we have perfect timing here. And again, I want to thank our panelists as well, those that were here today, Erin Keel and Samantha Arce from Better Homes and Gardens, and Chris Loesch from Deep Dive Inspections. I hope I said that right this time. Did I say that right?
Close enough.
Okay. My name always gets butchered too, but so I try not to. And Kinsey Jackson from the Title Station, and our behind the scenes committee members. We had Jana Pratt and Karen Williams de Castro, Ada Rodriguez and Stephanie Camacho were also wonderful help in putting all of this together. And please join us on March 6th. That's 2 weeks from today at 4 p.m. And we're going to have a guest speaker from discussing insurance, the home insurance and the windstorm and all of that fun stuff and flood and all the things you need to look out for there. So also a very important topic. And we're glad to be your resource and your one-stop shop here at Better Homes and Gardens Real Estate Destinations. I'm Jacqueline Kelly, your broker, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much.